I think all the stuff that the bootcamp teaches, anyone can just go and learn it for free on YouTube or just by picking up a book from a library or anywhere. The problem most of the time is that most people they don't have the right approach of learning.
Welcome to another episode of the iOS Dev Podcast. In today's video, we have Mohammad Azam with us. Mohammad is a Udemy instructor, a YouTuber, and he actually teaches web and iOS bootcamps. I've seen that you've been diving really deep into SwiftData, right?
Yes, I think SwiftData is definitely very interesting. Anything related to data, at least for me, I found it to be very interesting. And I can always relate it to Realm framework, which is from MongoDB, or any other ORM-ish kind of framework. SwiftData is not really an ORM, but it's definitely feels that way. So it's definitely interesting. Yeah.
Is that like the best part so far?
I think it's very early stages. I found like a lot of different glitches or bugs in SwiftData right now. So obviously, I don't think anybody should be building their apps based on SwiftData. I mean, there's some issues with the predicates and all that stuff going on. So definitely, it needs. I mean, it's still in beta version, so it will take some time to evolve. But it's definitely a good step in the right direction, because it's much more simpler as compared to CoreData. But SwiftData does use CoreData behind the scene underneath, but all that stuff is hidden from us. So that's good.
Oh, yeah, it's good then. I still haven't taken a stab at it yet because, as you said, it's still fairly new. So I might wait a little bit until it matures.
Absolutely, yeah. That's a good choice.
And how did you get into iOS development?
I think I got into iOS development probably around 2010. One of my colleagues, he is like a really Apple fanboy, so he showed me iPhone and iPad, and he was always using a Mac. And I was a hardcore Microsoft person, like with
Oh yeah.
PC and everything. And then he said, okay, you can make money off your apps. And I'm like, okay, well, let's see how we can do that. So I just ordered the Mac just, in front of him, and created the app like a kids game in 10 days using iOS 3.2, I think, Objective-C obviously, and Cocos 2D framework. And the game was just for kids, alphabets. You have to kind of like pop the alphabets that you see on the screen. And after that, I was kind of hooked. I created a lot of other games, but then moved on to creating more of a different kind of app, like vegetable gardening app that was also featured by Apple. So that was fun, and that always interests me. Like iOS, they just keep coming out with new stuff every WWDC, so it's always exciting.
Yeah. So you were doing it more in like your free time at that point. Then did you transition into like a job, or did you kept doing it as like a side hobby?
I did it for as a side hobby, but then I was a consultant, so I asked the company that, hey, if you have any iOS project, I would love to work on it. So I was sent to some oil and gas companies in Houston, Texas, where I live, and I was able to work on a number of, iOS projects for very large oil and gas companies. So that was always fun. And I also worked with a retail company and finance company, all located in Houston, on some iOS projects. So that was also much fun.
What kind of apps do like oil companies need?
Hmm.
Like, is it like internal stuff, or was it
It's
like,
internal, yeah. I
yeah?
would say yes. Mostly it's internal stuff. Yeah, it's just to keep track of their employees. They have like some pending requests that they do. So anytime you get a request, you have to do like fill out the request. You have to send notification, receive notification. And with all of these oil and gas companies, obviously security was always an issue. I mean, you can't do notification on their Wi-Fi network, so I have to go outside on my own Wi-Fi network to check the notifications. So all of these security firewalls, they have to alter and edit to for make it to work. But yeah, most of the stuff that oil and gas companies they did was obviously for their internal employees.
What caused the shift into more on like the teaching side of things?
Mhm. I was always teaching one form or the other. I think back and even in 2002, when I actually came to US, as a student, I was already writing some articles on .NET, C Sharp, and all that stuff on codeproject.com, where I was publishing articles. So I was teaching one way or the other, and then I started with YouTube or publishing videos for other content providers. But I think probably around 2015 or so, I was contacted by a bootcamp, Iron Yard, and they said that, hey, if you want to teach iOS development, you can come and teach at our bootcamp. And I'm like, yeah, I would love to. And I taught iOS development over there. I taught web development. Then I transitioned into a different company called Digital Crafts, where I am right now. And I teach full stack web development for the last 5 or 6 years now. So it's definitely different, but it's fun because you're basically changing or taking part in changing someone's life, or their family tree at least, and you can see the result much quicker because when they get a job, that's like, I think, the perfect result for me at least.
Yeah. And now that you've been doing that for a while, can you tell like which students will will like succeed and which won't, or is it like random? So
no, I think I can definitely tell. I mean, I think students who are, trying on their own, even from the start, and experimentation and not really giving up, and they're just there, every day they're just trying it out. They are, I mean, sometimes they do get frustrated, of course, that's fine, but they at least try out at least 30, 45 minutes to an hour on their own, hitting all the brick walls, and eventually finding a solution. And there are always these students who are working on their side projects. Like some of them will learn something on the side, like they will learn Firebase on the side, they will learn some React stuff on the side or something else. So I think those are the students that are, they tend to succeed more as compared to other ones.
Piggying back on that, do you think the biggest mistake people learning make is giving up when like they hit roadblocks?
I think maybe the biggest mistake is saying that, okay, I will be able to, put down this much amount and enroll in a boot camp, and then I will just not do anything. I will just coast. And after a couple of months or 4 or 5 months, I will become a developer. So it doesn't really happen that way. Obviously, you have to show up to work and work every day. I mean, that's like kind of like saying that you have a gym membership. You never go to the gym, and you're thinking, okay, I'm gonna gain muscle or lose weight or whatever your goal is. So you have to just come every day. You have to be consistent, and when you hit a brick wall, that's fine. Try out different approaches. If it doesn't work, then obviously ask me, ask our TA that we have, or even post a question on Stack Overflow, because eventually when you graduate, that is what you will be doing. You'll be posting questions on different forums. Try to be independent as early on as possible.
Yeah, that is super important.
Yep.
Yeah, learning how to problem solve like on your own.
Yes. And breaking down the problem into much smaller chunks. I think that's some of the skills that eventually students will have to develop. If you look at the problem, you can sometimes get overwhelmed that, okay, this is such a big problem. How do I solve this? So I always tell them to break it down into much smaller pieces, like micro problems, and then solve those little problems. And then eventually, automatically, you will solve the big one.
I think that's like great advice, like in general, like in life, like taking the big problems and just chunking them down into smaller pieces. And
Yep. Yeah. That's just a skill that eventually they will develop, but it does take some time to develop those skills.
And do you have any different advice for, like, let's say I want to learn a particular topic, whether it's like CoreData or MVVM architecture, something like that, right?
Mm-hmm. I think practice, obviously, read the documentation, watch the WWDC videos. Knowledge is always going to be your friend. And the best way to learn is to just start building some app. Like you can build like a really simple to-do list or some things like that. But the more features you're going to add to your app using that framework, the more you will learn about that framework and all the limitations of that framework also. So I mean, it is because, yeah, so I build like a lot of different prototypes because for the Udemy stuff. And when I'm building this, then so I started to see different patterns and different limitations. And then I have to adjust the architecture that I'm using. So that always helps. Like more practice, more code, reading good code also. So go on GitHub or Stack Overflow or wherever and read articles, read the code and inspire, get inspired from the good code that you see. And then every day just improve a little bit. That's it.
And regarding Udemy, do you have any particular thought process when you go into creating a course?
First of course, I choose a topic like, let's say, SwiftData or ARKit and all that stuff. I don't really, I mean, I create kind of like an outline of the topics that I want to discuss. And then it's more of, I don't think I'm that organized in terms of that I'm going to write all the lectures or write the script for it. I usually base all of my courses on the projects that I will be doing in the course. So I will create a project for a health app or, some sort of an e-commerce application or something, or a maps application. And then the course, or at least a section of a course, will be dedicated to that particular code base. So I don't really rehearse the lectures. I do have the code written on the side, of course, that I refer when I'm teaching. But I don't really write any script on anything. I just like to create courses on the things that I love. Sometimes those are new things like SwiftData, Reality Kit. And so I don't really have a very structured process for creating these courses. Yeah.
And are you excited for the VisionPro? Will we see some Vision OS courses?
Yeah, I was thinking of VisionPro. I don't know if VisionPro will be part of the Reality Kit course or will it be different. I'll have to see because I haven't really played around with it. I have obviously seen the videos of the Reality Kit that they have, or the Vision Pro headset that they have, and it looks very, very interesting. I don't really plan to buy it right now, but it's definitely, when the SDK comes out, I definitely want to take some time to play around with it. Yeah.
Yeah, same here. Like I really just want to see what it looks like what a basic project looks like in a Vision Pro.
Yeah, I think it's definitely a step in the right direction. It will take probably a decade or so for Apple to go through or refine their product, because right now the Vision Pro, the device, the headset, is not something that you can wear outside. You can't just walk around with it in your street or wherever. So I think they have to eventually trim it down so much that it will be hard to distinguish between a Vision Pro device versus a normal glasses that you wear. So once they reach that particular scale or that particular refinement, then it will be definitely more interesting to me, at least.
And that's crazy to think about, because technology wise, that's very advanced. Like,
yeah, absolutely,
super. Like to just have like some glasses that do basically the same thing that a VR headset is doing or AR headset is doing.
Yeah, definitely very advanced technology. Yeah.
So you think we'll get there in 10 years?
Maybe not. Maybe it will take more time. Yeah, I mean, nobody knows, but obviously these kind of devices that Apple they're in the right direction. It's just the start of this reality stuff. So we will hopefully see, 10, maybe 15, maybe nobody knows, but I think that will be an ideal point or tipping point of like, okay, this is now becoming very interesting. Because right now, with that, the device that they have, it's really cool and all the stuff that it does is really impressive, but it's not something that you can just, wear it in public.
Yeah.
You will just look really weird. So yeah, hopefully, after they refine their devices, and it can take a decade or two even, hopefully we'll get to see those things.
Yeah. And where do you think the future of iOS development is going? Do you think maybe the Vision Pro will play a role in that, or?
I think the Vision Pro, I see it as kind of like a watch OS, or I kind of see it as a watch device, which is like, okay, you can have it That's, some people will have it, some will not have it. Obviously, the price factor right now is very hard for everyone to get that, which like what is it, 3,499 or 3,500? That's just the initial release, I think. I think this can be the new direction that maybe in the future we won't even have our mobile devices, no iPhone, nothing. We will just have these VisionPro devices, very slim down version. If we want to make a call, we'll just put our, those headphones in our ears, and we'll just dial up. It will be like a fake or a AR phone that we'll just dial the number, or even just tell Siri to dial the number, and then that will be it. So maybe that's the destination we will eventually reach. Obviously, it's going to take a lot of time.
And how about in terms of iOS development?
iOS development, I think it's moving along. I mean, with the SwiftData, SwiftUI, definitely SwiftUI has changed the game. Now you can create your application much more quicker using SwiftUI. SwiftData is also a really good step in the right direction. I don't think that Apple will invest time in creating some sort of a hybrid kind of a framework or a cross-platform framework so that it can run on Android devices. I don't think Apple cared that much about Android or even the web. We're definitely moving along. I'm not sure what else I want to see in iOS development. Maybe a little bit more advanced testing framework so you can test your SwiftUI views. Maybe that is something good to add. I think they keep on adding the machine learning stuff like Create ML and all that stuff, so that's always good. So they are moving slowly, but consistently they are moving in the right direction. Yeah.
Is there anything that you missed from UIKit?
I don't think I miss anything from the UIKit. The only thing I was missing from UIKit was kind of like the maps and creating overlays on the map. But I believe they have added that stuff in SwiftUI for iOS 17. But apart from that, yeah, I don't remember that I was ever dealing with UIKit stuff. Most of the stuff that SwiftUI provides is actually more than enough.
Yeah, this past few months, I've taken a deep dive into SwiftUI. And before I was working mostly on UIKit. And yeah, for the most part, like SwiftUI has like almost everything you would need, and then it's just like small things. Maybe I think like that Safari view controller. I had to use a view representable, but other than that, like SwiftUI has pretty much all that.
Everything. There are some glitches that I talked about on Twitter, like clearing text boxes or text field when those are bounded to a number. They're not clearing it up. So those kind of things, those glitches are still there, I think, since the first version. So those are a little bit annoying. But I mean, I know people have workarounds for those glitches. But hopefully it will improve. They are, adding some stuff to it, like they added macros, model and observation stuff in iOS 17. I don't know if it's the right direction or not, but it definitely makes things simpler. Again, there are some glitches over there that you can't really bind to environment stuff unless you use bindable, so that's kind of annoying. I think that's just a glitch or a bug, but hopefully those things will get fixed.
What would you say the best cross-platform for development is?
I think the two comes to mind, React Native and Flutter. I have worked with both. I like Flutter more because Flutter, it's more of a natural kind of like a cross-platform. It's easy to get started. It's very, very similar to, actually both of them are very similar to SwiftUI. And Flutter, they kind of like recreate the controls from scratch. So they are not going to render a UI text field in iOS and a different text field on Android. They recreate it from scratch using Flutter, using Dart, or whatever the underlying framework is, like whatever C++ or something. They use that to recreate those controls. So that is why they always get like 60 frames per second. But I like Flutter. I think it's a good choice for cross-platform applications, definitely.
That's good. I only have like a little experience in React Native and coming from solely native development to to something like React Native was very interesting.
Very interesting. Definitely, yeah.
Because you had to like use the Cocoa Pods
Yes.
to
Yep.
initialize the project. It was very strange. Let's say an indie developer. Should they go just iOS native or cross-platform?
I think indie developer would benefit more if their application is native, because then they can use all the different features, all the power, the performance stuff provided by the actual framework. Because most of the indie developers, well, I guess all of the indie developers, they are making their revenue, they are making their money through the use of their apps. So your app has to be, best looking, it has to be very high performance, and you can get that from native frameworks. And as you said, companies, if they're working on internal apps, or if their primary mean is not to make revenue through the apps, but it's more of a medium to share or display information, then cross-platform will work for them because they already have the resources, like C# developers for Xamarin or JavaScript developers for React Native. So it makes sense for them to go with the cross-platform route instead of the native.
I watched one of your recent talks on MVVM and SwiftUI.
Mm-hmm.
So why should people stop using MVVM?
I think the main issue is that it doesn't really provide any benefit. When you create another layer of view models, and I did that for 3 years, I created another layer of view models, but they were just adding code. They were not really providing any benefits. If you also look at Apple's implementation of their projects, they are not, they are in some cases calling some stuff view models, but they're not creating an extra layer for view models. So my talk was mainly about my experience with working with SwiftUI since 2019. And I keep running into issues with creating separate view models for every view. That was just adding more and more code without any benefits. And eventually I learned that the view itself, which you have in SwiftUI, is actually also a view model. But obviously that does not mean that you should just start putting everything inside the view. That's not what the talk is about. You should still separate your code. Depending on the client-server app, you can create a model, which I like to call aggregate model. Some people could call it data store, which can get the information from the service using HTTP client and then just give it to the view, and that's it. So no view models are required. And the nice thing to see now, when I propose this, well, not an idea because it's not really my idea. When I proposed this like a year ago, there was a lot of backlash about this. That hey, I don't think that's correct, and blah blah blah. But now, moving like 1 year after, I tweeted about it and I published about it. Now I see a lot of people moving and talking, at least talking about it. So a lot of people are moving into that direction, and a lot of people are also talking in that, okay, you know what? I have all this code in view models that doesn't make any sense. So what should I do? So I think it's nice that people are experimenting and people are at least critically thinking about the SwiftUI architecture instead of just blindly accepting what other people are doing. That's what I did. I just blindly accepted that, okay, this is the architecture I want to use and I have to use, but I was wrong. But yeah, so I talked about it on my blog about the MV pattern, or much simpler pattern that you can use. If your application works with MVVM, that's fine. I think I just find it to be unnecessary to create all those different layers of view models when they don't really provide any benefits.
Yeah, I've had a similar experience in a way. Since when I moved to SwiftUI, at first I'm like, oh, view model.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But I'm currently working on a project where most of the information is like on a data store. And it's a lot like cleaner, like the code, you don't have a bunch of random view models that are doing like one thing.
Yeah. Especially I mostly talk about the client server architecture. So I I use a very different approach in that, which I call aggregate model, or data store is the same thing. If I'm using CoreData, I would have a different kind of architecture. If I'm using not CoreData and not HTTP client or client server, then it will be a little bit different, kind of like the Scrum Dinger app from Apple. So that's also like a MV architecture that they have. It all ties up to the source of truth, and I think that's the most important part. You only add observable objects when you have a source of truth has changed, and that's it. So we have to just keep those things in mind when we are creating these SwiftUI applications.
What architecture would you recommend for the core data?
So I played around with Active Record for core data, or a variation of Active Record, and I wrote about it. The problem that I face with completely going 100% Active Record is if you add save functions, and we can take an example of SwiftData because that's now the future direction, I guess. The problem with having save function, which I try to do inside your models, so that you can say customer.save and it's saved. Nice and simple, easy to read. The problem with those things is that you still need the model context to save that. So you need to provide your model with the model context, and you can, which is fine. I mean, you can create like a kind of like a global model context and create that property anywhere in your application. The problem with that approach is that if you want to preview data, then it becomes harder. So Apple in their application, I think it's called Backyard Birding or Birding Backyard, something like that. They are kind of using a variation of active record pattern, but they don't really save the stuff inside the model, which makes sense. So they use to save the stuff, or they're saving the stuff right inside the view by calling context.insert or context.save. And I think that might be the right approach to go for Swift data applications. Instead of moving everything into the save into the model, just have the logic in the model. Like if you have any business logic, yeah, put it in the model. Don't put it in the view, put it in the model. You can test it out. But the save functions, all those things, queries and all that stuff, you can put it in the view. That's fine. So it's very hard to explain because it's a variation of active record, but it's not 100% active record.
Yeah, I'll take a look into that. And you said you have a blog on it, right?
I have a blog on client-server applications. Let me see. I have a blog post on client-server applications. So I don't think it covers the core data part, but that usually revolves around, that's a very long blog post. It actually talks about the architecture and other things that I learned over the course of 3 years when you're building SwiftUI applications.
Is that the biggest or more surprising thing you learned in like the 3 years of SwiftUI, or has anything else stood out?
I think those are the big things that are discussed in the article, like building large-scale application using SwiftUI. Those were definitely the big things that I learned, because when SwiftUI came out in 2019, I started using it, and I was actually the one who was also following MVVM, and I was doing all that stuff, and created a lot of apps using MVVM and all that stuff, but it was just I was never comfortable. It's like you're writing too much code, it's just unnecessary stuff. And after a lot of research, talking to a lot of other developers, or not a lot of developers, but at least developers who were facing the same issues, we all kind of agreed that this is not the right path. This is not what the Apple is advocating, because you start losing the simplicity of the SwiftUI framework, what it's giving you. So we have to be careful when we are using an architecture. We just have to make sure that we are not writing unnecessary code, because in the end, code is not an asset, it's a liability. The more code you write, you're creating those liabilities. So less is always more. I think sometimes what I've seen is people get confused when they see such less code and working. They say, okay, this cannot be right because it's so less code. So I have to make it more complicated so I can call myself a senior developer. So let me add interceptors, let me add coordinators, let me add dependency injection, let me add a bunch of other stuff so I can call myself senior developer. But I think the ultimate sophistication is the simplicity. So if you can make it simple for everyone to understand, I think that's the most hard part.
Yeah, I think there's a quote out there like anyone can make anything complicated. It's making it simple.
That's
It's
the hard part. Yeah,
yeah.
definitely. And what I've learned is that when Apple designs the UI, they actually want you to use in a particular way. You can go about and using it any way you want, but then you will have to, you will be kind of like trapped, and then you will have to, oh, I have to do this, I have to do dependency injection. So those kind of things, if you want to use SwiftUI, just use SwiftUI in a way that Apple is telling you to use SwiftUI. I think there was a really good talk for NS Spain where they were talking about, I think it was SoundCloud team, that they also use like Viper and view models and all that stuff. And Apple said, well, your app is like 10 times slower, so fix that. We cannot publish it to the App Store. And then they said, okay, and then they just use the fetch request and all those things that are provided by Apple, and then it was very fast. Because sometimes I think we don't understand that these things that Apple is providing you, like the fetch request property wrapper for CoreData, and I think the query property wrapper for SwiftData, they're very optimized for working with SwiftUI. So if you're not using that and you're using NS fetch results controller, like the old stuff for CoreData, then you will have to pay the price. I mean, you will have to write all the code. And it's not little code, it's a lot of code that you have to type on your own. So instead of recreating the stuff that Apple has already done for you, just use the stuff that Apple has provided you and use that in your app.
That's really good advice. I'm gonna keep that in mind while I'm making my projects.
Yep.
And what advice would you have for aspiring iOS developers?
I think just start learning something every single day. I mean, and practice it by writing code. So write a lot of code. Sometimes your code will obviously not be good. That's fine. Just make it work. Try to improve it. But every single day, try to do something. Try to learn. Okay, I'm going to learn CoreData. I'm going to learn how to insert into CoreData, how to update, how to navigate, create apps, learn, read articles, get knowledge from videos, articles, blogs, tweets, whatever, and try to focus on whatever time you can give, 45 minutes to an hour, on pure learning. Just learn, practice, and practice, and that's it.
That's really good advice. And what are your thoughts on bootcamp versus no bootcamp?
I think all the stuff that the bootcamp teaches, anyone can just go and learn it for free on YouTube or just by picking up a book from a library or anywhere. The problem most of the time is that most people, they don't have willpower to, or what's the right word? They don't have, the right approach of learning, So they're not learning every day. They will skip a couple of days. They will skip this. They will not learn this. They will not understand this. When they hit a brick wall, they will give up. They don't know how to ask a question online. So, all right. So those are the problems that people will face. But all the content that I teach or any bootcamp teaches, anyone can just pick up a book from anywhere or watch the videos and they can learn it. I think bootcamp gives them structure. I think that's what it gives you. It gives you structure so that you have every day from 9 to 5 or whatever that time you have for 4 months. You have to be doing the project. You have to be doing the assignments. You are in a group of people who are doing the same. So you will form those friendships and then you will learn from them also. And then you have access to the instructor and the TA who will have more knowledge because they have already learned this stuff and they can answer your question much quicker than you searching or try to post a question online. So that's, I think, the biggest difference between bootcamp and just going independent. I mean, I think anyone can learn anything online, but most people don't because they don't have that structure in their life. So the boot can give you structure and access to the instructors.
Yeah, I think those two are like the main things. Like the structure it gives you, and like the consistency of you're gonna be there, or you have to be there, like for a certain amount of time every day, or at least whatever, however the boot camp is set up. So it'll really depend on the person. Like, do you feel like you are structured and disciplined enough to do it on your own, or will you need a boot camp?
Sure. Yep.
Moving along, then, do you use ChatGPT at all for while you're programming, or?
Yeah, I do use ChatGPT programming sometimes. I do use it for sometimes writing YouTube description for my videos, or writing even the title for my Udemy courses, or description for Udemy courses, writing some sort of a corporate emails, using it for creating small exercises for my students. So if they're learning JavaScript and they're learning arrays in JavaScript or list, I will just ask ChatGPT to create 20 exercises or 20 questions, small questions related to arrays in JavaScript. So it will just write that. I'll give it to my students so they can practice more. So I definitely enjoy ChatGPT.
How do you think that AI and these like large language models will impact like iOS development?
I don't know, how it will impact. I think eventually we will start seeing in Xcode integration with these AI stuff. So you might be writing HTTP layer or a call to some web service, and Xcode will suggest that, hey, I can actually do it for you. So, is this what you're asking? And then it will just write the whole thing for you. So I think those integration will be coming in later years. For iOS, for any kind of a developer kind of a thing, I don't think their jobs are in trouble because now ChatGPT can write code, because writing code is one thing, but you have to understand the code also. So that is, if a person doesn't understand the code, then it may work. You can copy paste it, but if you want to change it, then it's going to be a problem because now you don't understand what's going on. So you have to obviously understand the code that ChatGPT is giving you so that you can eventually change it, maintain it, and things like that.
Yeah, I think it's like a super powerful tool that can make iOS developers like even more productive.
Yeah, absolutely. I use it for, if I'm stuck somewhere, I want to convert something from somewhere, or especially for date time operations, I will just ask ChatGPT, okay, how do I format this part? How do I convert from here to there? And most of the time it's able to give answers. Sometimes it obviously doesn't really have the knowledge to do those things, but it can definitely help guide me in the right direction, at least sometimes. Yeah.
Have you used the GitHub Copilot?
I have used it very briefly, so I don't think I've used it enough to do anything with that. Yeah.
No, I brought it up because I'm waiting for, hopefully Apple does something similar, because it's pretty cool that like the autofill part. Like I feel like it saves a bunch of time.
Yes.
Like
yes.
If you're writing like something, I don't know, maybe like a for loop or something very basic, that it can just autocomplete for you. Is there anything else you wanted to speak on or talk about?
No, I think we covered a lot of stuff. I will be in New York for Try Swift conference. I'll be doing a workshop over there for a Create ML, which is the machine learning in iOS. So yeah, if any of your viewers or listeners are out there, come and hang around. That's going to be fun.
Thank you, Mohammed, for coming on the show. So where can the viewers and listeners follow you and find you?
Yeah, I'm pretty active on Twitter. You can follow me on Twitter at AzamSharp, AzamSharp. And you can also visit my website, AzamSharp.com.
Thank you for being on the show, and thank you guys for tuning in. See you guys next time.